Hello everyone, I'm Daz and welcome to American Civil War and UK history, and you join me here at Richborough Roman Fort here in the beautiful East Kent countryside. The reason I'm at Richborough today is because there's a new addition to the site, so let's go and take a look at it. Okay, so I'm joined by English Heritage volunteer Jenny, and you might recognise Jenny because Jenny gave me a tour around Richborough 2 years ago, and the video you can find on my YouTube channel. So hello Jenny, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very nice to be back.
And so tell us about the new addition that's behind us. So we've got the gateway to Britannia.
Okay.
So tell us about the addition and what went into putting this together.
Okay. I can only really tell you the headlines because there were lots of experts who were really involved in trying to recreate, to the best of our knowledge, what the Romans constructed here 2,000 years ago, or almost 2,000 years ago. When they landed here in AD 43, they built themselves a beachhead. They built themselves a straight line with two ditches right across what was an island as the kind of frontier, if you like, of the Roman Empire for a period of time, a supply base, a sort of beachhead. And the gateway was, as the word implies, it was the gateway to those two large ditches called the Claudian ditches. And what we have reconstructed on site, or what lots of very clever people have reconstructed on site, is what we believe, to the best of our knowledge, to be very close to what the Romans actually assembled here 2,000 years ago.
And again, it's on Watling Street as well. So just tell us the significance of Watling Street quickly while I have you.
Well, Watling Street's later, of course, because one of the things about this site is the Claudian ditches and this gateway were built in AD 43, and within no more than a few years, all of that was filled in and pulled down. And Richborough became a very large, thriving, commercial town. There's one historian sort of recently said that he believed that Kent during the 1st and 2nd centuries became a consumer, cultural kind of revolution, in a sense, that so many people were here and trade and politics was going on, and it was a thriving, largely peaceful place. At the height of that, the big monumental arch was built, the beginning of Watling Street. It wasn't called Watling Street until much later, but the big triumphal arch, which I've talked about before, which we're now referring to as the monumental arch. There's a distinction between the triumph, which is actually someone's triumph on arrival, and a monument to celebrate the conquering of Britannia. So we're calling it the monumental arch, and the entrance to Britannia and the beginning of that M1 of the Roman Empire, Watling Street, comes later. So the whole site is a series of different dates, but it's all here together, so one has to unpick what came first, second, third, etc.
Okay, through the magic of technology, we've come a quarter of a mile from the fort. We come to a very, very important location. So Jenny, please tell us where we are.
Yes, we're standing on the site of the amphitheatre. We're actually standing on the rim. We're about a third of a mile, probably slightly less, away from the shore fort, and behind me, I think, Darren, there is actually the Saxon shore fort. So the total size of Richborough was about 21 hectares, or about 50 football pitches. And the amphitheatre is on the most southerly end of the town. The first reference we have to an amphitheatre goes back to Tudor times, although there's probably evidence further back in time. But there was a chap in Tudor times who actually wanted to build a canal to help the town of Sandwich, because the river had silted up, or the Wanstone Channel had silted up. And he drew this lovely map. And on this lovely map, he drew Richborough. This is circa 1540, but it's the first graphic we have that we actually know that, you know, someone was actually making, you know, kind of recognising the amphitheatre for what it was. And that is in the 1540s. And then later on, other antiquarians came along and the story of the amphitheatre started to grow. The only other excavation that has taken place before the excavation that was undertaken by Historic England in conjunction with English Heritage and the National Lottery was in 1849, when a chap called William Rolfe, who was a local man to Sandwich, he actually undertook an excavation and he found what he thought was one of the entrances, and that was 170 years ago. So it's always been on the agenda to do another excavation because so little was known about it. And therefore finally the opportunity happened, and after various delays because of the pandemic, in the late autumn of 2021 a 9-week excavation commenced. But basically, if you can imagine, the amphitheatre is about a 62 by 50 ovoid. And the excavation plan was to just treat that for just a second as if it was a cake, taking a slice out the cake, so one trench that went in from the outside right into the amphitheatre, and then a second trench which was buttressed up against the outside wall, so they could establish what was going on both in terms of the design and build of the amphitheatre and indeed what was happening outside of it, just around its walls. And that was what was achieved. The broad findings, and there's a lot more to come because so many samples, so much of the dating evidence, so many other bits about the amphitheatre have been sent away for further analysis, that what I'm saying to you today may be very different in a few months' time. But certainly the best to my knowledge today as a volunteer guide here is that they know now that the amphitheatre was made of chalk. And what happened is, when they dug it out, they dug out all the chalk and they piled it up to make the terracing, but they made the inside of the arena walls from chalk blocks, and we've got some very nice illustrations of chalk blocks. The actual terracing or seating area was about 8 metres wide, and the outer wall, the outer side of the amphitheatre, was made of turf blocks. So the idea that you take turf and put layers of turf to turf, mud to mud, turf to turf, mud to mud. So extremely robust, very similar to the way parts of Hadrian Wall were built. And we believe now, and there's quite a degree of certainty about that it was actually built in the 1st century, or certainly started in the 1st century, and it runs almost simultaneously with the monumental arch. So the two big civic buildings were built at a similar time. Amphitheatres were synonymous with the Romans. They were invented by the Romans. We have somewhere about a dozen amphitheatres in England that we know about, and maybe others to be discovered. But amphitheatres were incredibly important for the transmission of culture, for how to be a good Roman, all those things about sort of socialising, or the Romanisation, if you like, the process of taking the people who were living here and making them Roman. So the transmission of how to be Roman. Obviously lots of associations of graphic gladiatorial fighting and executions and animal fights. They were all part of the culture of the day, and all part of the importance of gathering people together for the transmission, and also the reward and the training. They were used for training as well. So amphitheatres were an incredibly important aspect of town life, and we're very, it's unusual to have an amphitheatre by a town, and obviously what this is indicative of is how important the town of Richborough was. We believe it carried on, it seated between 4,000 and 5,000 people. I think the archaeologists and the people who did the excavations believe it probably went out of use before the end of the population of Richborough, which was the whole 400 years. I think their thinking is that it probably went into disuse somewhere late in the 3rd, perhaps into the 4th century. We also know that the buildings, that slice of buildings that were excavated that were buttressed up against it, we know that there was evidence there, lots of finds which were all 3rd and 4th century, but lots of indications that this was the rough end of town. This is where catering took place, where lots of animal bones, but very busy into the 3rd and 4th centuries.
Big shout out to site manager Serena for letting me film today, and Jenny, English Heritage Volunteer Guide. Really appreciate it. What I would say to you, ladies and gentlemen, is definitely, if you're in the area, come down to Richborough Roman Fort. It's worth your time. It's so beautiful. It's a great day out. You can let the kids run around, and it's just a great place to come and be. So thank you for joining me. I'm Daz, American Civil War and UK History. Cheers.